Hello, everyone. My name is Alana, and I am so excited to welcome you to our live lesson this afternoon. We're excited to be partnering with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. So, for those of you that are new to Nelson, for over a century, Nelson has been proud to be Canada's leading education content provider, empowering K-12 educators and students. Our commitment to meeting the unique needs of students and teachers led to the development of Edwin, our digital learning platform that makes learning more engaging, inclusive, and accessible. So we're so excited to have both the students and classrooms from our Edwin side of things, as well as from Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. I want to begin with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the traditional land and territory where Edwin's head office is located in Toronto, the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of Scugog, Hiawatha First Nation, Alderville First Nation, and the Métis Nation. And our learning goals for today: we will investigate environmental issues and consider their impacts on communities and the natural world. We'll identify actions that can help protect, restore, or conserve natural systems and resources. We'll develop an understanding of conservation, stewardship, and sustainability. And we're so excited to welcome George today. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Joe. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Elena. It is my absolute pleasure to be welcoming George today. If you've never seen George present, I think everybody out here is in for a real treat. George is an explorer and storm chaser. He recently has returned from a crazy 3+ months bouncing all over the world, from East Antarctica and the magnetic South Pole, the French Southern and Antarctic Islands, out in the Sahara. If I had to list all the places, I think we wouldn't have any time for this event and to get into some Q&A action. But along the way, he did see some incredible wildlife, came face to face with some conservation issues that wildlife and some of our wild places are facing. So I'm going to reach backstage here and see if I can find George. There he is. George, how you doing?
Joe, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, and thank you, Alana, and everyone else out there.
All right. Well, great to have you today, George. We've got classrooms across Canada. I'm sure there's some in the U.S. sneaking in here as well today. Those who are tuning in, don't be shy to use that chat sidebar. Let us know where you're watching from. Send us in some questions for when the time comes. But for now, George, I'm going to give the floor over to you.
Thanks so much, Joe. Hi, everyone. I'm George Kourounis. I am an explorer and storm chaser, explorer in residence with the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, and I also work with National Geographic and many others. And as Joe mentioned, I just came back from this monumental trip, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about one portion of it, about my time in East Antarctica. It's a part of Antarctica that's not visited very often because it's very hard to get to. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's like to get there, a little bit about some of the places I went to, and I want to talk a bit as well about 3 different species that make this place home, and some of the conservation challenges that they're facing, and some of the successes that they're having as well. So I'm not chasing storms today. We're going to be talking about these remote parts of the world and the creatures that live there. Let me get my screen all shared here, and we're going to be off to the races. There we go. Let me just hide that. Whoops. There we go. All right. So literally, I just came back a couple of days ago from this monumental journey that literally took me around the world. And the part we're going to be talking about today is the ocean journey I took down to Antarctica. This voyage started in Australia. So I flew from my home here in Toronto, Canada, to Australia, and then boarded a ship, took it down to the East Antarctica, to the magnetic South Pole, which I'll talk about in a little bit here. And then we did a partial sail around Antarctica, stopping at a few different spots, and then came up through some Antarctic islands that are owned by France, and eventually ended in Cape Town in South Africa. That whole portion took about a month, and it was aboard this ship here. It's an icebreaker called Le Commandant Charcot. It's operated by a company out of France called Penant. And it's probably one of the most sophisticated icebreakers in the world. This ship is capable of going almost anywhere. It goes to the North Pole every year, and it's able to go to places most ships can't. So it was a real treasure to be available to be on board and to go to some of these places and see what's there. But it wasn't an easy journey. Here's an example of what it was like to sail on the Southern Ocean. It is really rough, but on this particular day, we had these crashing waves that were producing these beautiful rainbows because the light was just right. Now imagine trying to eat dinner while your plate is sliding all over the place back and forth. So very difficult to just get around the ship at times, very difficult to eat. And I'm normally very prone to seasickness, but I didn't throw up on this trip. So I feel very proud about that I managed to keep my breakfast down, which is not always easy when you're out on the open ocean like that. And so we went to the magnetic South Pole. Now, the Earth has two poles, or actually technically it has four. You've got the North Pole and the South Pole, and then you've got the magnetic North Pole and the magnetic South Pole. And the difference is actually quite important. So if you imagine spinning a basketball on your finger, that ball is rotating on what we would call the geographic pole. So that's where the center of the Earth's rotation is. And in the case of Antarctica, it's right in the middle, smack dab in the middle of Antarctica. But the Earth's core, this metal core at the very center of our planet, is also turning. And whenever you have a metal core like that turning, it generates these magnetic fields. And so the Earth itself is a giant magnet. And as we know, magnets have a North Pole and a South Pole as well. And the south magnetic pole of planet Earth is actually in the ocean off the coast of Antarctica. So the two are not in the same place. If your GPS is telling you where north is, if you take out a compass will always point to the magnetic North Pole. So we actually have two different norths. So it can get a bit confusing, especially if you're trying to navigate with just a map and a compass. You actually have to compensate for the distance that the magnetic pole is off from the actual rotation of the Earth. And it's moving. Every year it moves a little bit more. So it becomes a lot more complicated. So if you're trying to use a compass, well, we'll get to what happened when I brought a compass to this magnetic South Pole. So because the Earth is this giant magnet, it protects us from these solar winds that come from the sun. So the sun gives us light, it gives us heat, it allows us to have life here on planet Earth. But at the same time, it's sending these tiny particles, these charged particles, that would wreak absolute havoc on all of our electronics if this magnetic field that the Earth has wasn't there. So we're very lucky, very fortunate to have this rotating mass of iron in the center of our planet. So that magnetic field deflects these particles coming from the sun. They form this shield around us, but some of those particles do get directed towards the Earth, and they will interact with different elements in our atmosphere, like nitrogen and oxygen. And that's what produces the northern lights. So last year I was in Greenland aboard the exact same ship that I went to Antarctica in, and we got to see the beautiful aurora borealis, those greens and reds. If you've never seen the northern lights, I hope you get the opportunity to, because it is quite beautiful. But these particles not only go to the north, but they go to the south as well. So on this journey, on the exact same ship, I got to also see the southern lights. Instead of being called the northern or the aurora borealis, We call these the aurora australis. And not very many people get to see the southern lights because most of the southern hemisphere is ocean. So there isn't a lot of land where people live to actually see these. So it was a real honor to be able to see these beautiful displays of southern lights while on the ship, on our way down to the magnetic South Pole. So there we are. We're at the pole. It was February 24th when I actually made it to the pole. We're on the ship, and the pole, as I mentioned, the magnetic South Pole is out in the ocean. To go to the geographic pole, you've got to go on land to the center of Antarctica, but here we're out in the ocean, and there's really nothing there. And I took out my compass to see what would happen, and it was very confused. It didn't really know where to point. It was kind of trying to point down, which makes kind of sense because we're on the exact spot where all of those the lines of Earth's magnetism are. So if you're trying to navigate in this area using a compass, you're going to have no luck whatsoever. Thankfully, we had our GPS coordinates. We knew exactly where it was. So out here in the ocean, what kind of life is there? Well, of course, it's the ocean. There's fish and whales and things like that. But one of the most interesting creatures that spends its time out here are some of the seabirds. Now, in particular, the wandering albatross. I think this bird is fascinating. It is the largest flying bird. It has the largest wingspan of any bird on planet Earth. And the largest was 3.6 meters from wingtip to wingtip. That's almost 12 feet across. And if you want to compare that to a person, there you go. You can sort of get an idea of how big these birds are. They make a seagull look tiny, right? And they spend most of their life out in the ocean. There's an example of one next to a person, just to give you an idea of the size and the scale of these albatrosses. And they are absolutely fascinating. There's some weird stuff about these birds. They spend most of their time out at sea, flying around, just fishing, looking for fish and migrating around and such. They can spend years out on the open ocean without ever touching land. They can fly for thousands of kilometers, sometimes 1,000 kilometers a day. Trying to drive 1,000 kilometers in a day is difficult. I can't imagine what it's like to fly that far. And some of them have been known to go for 16,000 kilometers in a single trip to go out, hunt for food, and then bring that back to their chicks, which are on land, which I'll talk more about in a bit. So these things are the marathon athletes of the bird world. So much so that they can fly the equivalent of 10 times to the moon and back. And of course, we just sent 4 astronauts on the Artemis 2 mission to the moon and back. Now imagine doing that 10 times with no rocket ship. That is what these albatrosses can do. So it really is remarkable. It doesn't seem possible for a bird to be able to do this, and yet they do. But what's even crazier is that some of them can actually sleep while they're flying. And that just blows my mind. Like, I can't imagine trying to fly while sleeping. And what they do is they only really flap their wings a lot when they're taking off. Once they're flying, they work more like a glider, and they use those violent winds that occur there in the Southern Ocean near Antarctica, and they catch that wind. And so they're able to navigate and fly with flapping their wings very little. So their brain can actually shut off for these short periods of time to give them these little micro sleeps while they're flying. It's really a remarkable evolutionary adaptation. Now, some albatross species will actually land on the water and sleep there while sort of floating on the surface of the water. But again, this part of the world is known for being the roughest seas in the world. So I can't imagine how difficult it is for an albatross to sleep on the ocean or while flying. But yet, there they are. They can do it. So I find that just absolutely amazing. Here's where they tend to live, across the Southern Ocean there, and some of them in the Pacific as well. We're going to talk more about the ones in the Southern Hemisphere. And Where they nest is also quite interesting. They don't like nesting on large bodies of land like continents. They prefer these tiny islands. And the Southern Ocean off of Antarctica is got many of these little tiny islands, places like Crozet and Tristan da Cunha, these little tiny islands where there's usually a lot of cliffs and such, and that's where they like to build their nests. So here's an albatross with its chick and a whole bunch of other ones there, nesting on one of these southern islands. And they are facing quite a few threats, but the one that is probably the biggest on some of these islands is something that you might not think of. It's actually mice. So there are mice on these islands that are invasive species. They were accidentally brought there by seal hunters several hundred years ago. And what the mice end up doing is they end up attacking and eating these baby albatross chicks. And they will literally attack them and eat them alive. And it's horrible. It's this horrific thing that happens. And what's happening is because of climate change, the winters are not as cold there. And so fewer of these mice are dying off in the winter because it's not as cold. And they run out of their regular food. So they resort to attacking these birds. And they will even attack the adults as well. So it's this huge problem. And because the birds only nest in these tiny islands, you get these large populations. So if one island is affected, that's a big percentage of all of the birds. So it's really critical to solve this problem, but it's hard. What the conservationists are doing, is using helicopters to drop poisoned grain on some of these islands, which the mice will eat, but the albatrosses eat fish. So they're not interested in the grain. So this is one solution that they're working on right now. But operating helicopters in these places is very difficult. It's very expensive. The weather is bad, so it's hard for them to fly. You never want to put poison into the environment, but sometimes you have to save these threatened species like these albatross. But they're not the only bird species down there, of course. We've got the famous penguins of Antarctica. There are about a dozen species of penguins in the world, and the largest of them all are the emperor penguins. And this is a photo I took while down there in East Antarctica. There you can see the ship in the distance. And these emperor penguins are quite big. They're about the size of a toddler, pardon me, and they're absolutely beautiful. They look like they're wearing these black and white tuxedos, and the way they sort of scoot across the ice, I think, is hilarious. They can walk and waddle, but if the terrain is just right, they kind of paddle like a kayak, which I think is quite funny. Once they're in the water, though, they're like these little torpedoes. They're very much at home in the water. Now, these penguins, particularly the emperor penguins, they have an adaptation where they lay their eggs and raise their chicks, not on land, not in the water, but on what we call fast ice. So it's seawater that has frozen, and these sheets of seawater are still stuck to the shore. So they're close to shore, but they have their chicks on this sea ice, right? And so they are absolutely dependent on this fast ice, this sea ice. And if anything happens to that sea ice, then they've got a problem. And the places where these penguins live are usually in these large colonies. So you'll have lots of them in one particular place. And here's a map showing where all these different emperor penguin colonies are. And in the center, we've got a graph sort of showing the decline in their population. And there's been a few instances in recent years where some of these colonies have basically collapsed, where certain areas where this sea ice is, where there'll be tens of thousands of pairs of penguins have basically just disappeared. So they've actually jumped up to endangered species just recently. They actually jumped 2 categories. And what's happening is this ice is melting, of course. The climate's getting warmer, the oceans are getting warmer. The warmer oceans means it's harder for this ice to form and to remain solid. And so what happens is either the ice doesn't form and the penguins have nowhere to lay their eggs, or the ice breaks up and the penguin chicks end up in the water. And there they either freeze or they drown. So it's really unfortunate that this is something that's happening. But of course, now we know exactly what's causing this. So what we are, of course, working on, what we're trying to do is to prevent the oceans from warming any further. And the reason why this ocean warms so much is, think of it like putting on a black t-shirt. If you're outside on a hot day and you're wearing a black t-shirt, you're going to feel a lot hotter than if you wear a white t-shirt, because black really absorbs more of that sunlight. Well, the ocean surface is quite dark compared to the ice and the snow. So the ocean absorbs that energy, it warms up, and then melts the ice from underneath. So that's a huge, huge problem. So in order to save these penguins, we need to protect the sea ice. And of course, there's all kinds of initiatives going on right now, reducing carbon emissions, things like that. So the penguins have a bit of a rough time ahead of them, but if we continue working, we can save the emperor penguins. They are these beautiful, regal birds. Now, the last species that I want to talk about, or group of species, I suppose, are the whales of Antarctica. And there's quite a few whales that live there, and some of them have been doing really, really well from a conservation standpoint. So that's great. Now, of course, the largest of the whales is the blue whale. And we were really lucky. We managed to see a blue whale while down there in the Southern Ocean. And I've never seen one before. It was really a joy to be able to spot one out in the wild, of course. And these things are so big. They are the largest animal ever known to have lived, bigger than any dinosaur that has ever been that we know of so far. And to give you an idea of how large these animals are, they can be up to over 33 meters in length, over 110 feet long. They can weigh as much as 30 elephants or 2,500 people. One whale can weigh the same as 2,500 people. Their heart can be as big as a car, and their tongue can weigh as much as an entire elephant. So just to wrap your head around that, I think it's just absolutely amazing. So they're obviously a very important species, and where we saw it was in the Kerguelen Islands. We were on our way from Antarctica to South Africa, and we stopped in for a few days on these French islands, and this is where there's a lot of albatross nests and lots of penguin colonies, but there's also a lot of whales here. And there have been for quite some time. We actually went to this whaling station, which is now, of course, abandoned for many years, around late 1800s, early 1900s. This place was a working whaling station. So you would have these whalers, these whale hunters that would go out into the ocean. They would harpoon and catch these whales, and then they would bring them ashore, and they would boil the blubber, the fat that these whales have, into a liquid, and then that would be shipped around the world. And the world ran on whale oil for years and years and years. It was used to lubricate all kinds of machinery. The Industrial Revolution was only possible because of the lubrication that was provided by these whales and the whale oil that was produced from them. They were used to light homes. The oil was used in lamps to light the streets as well. So it was this really important product that we were exploiting, of course. And the whale populations declined dramatically because of this, to the point where many species almost went extinct because of this. And you can see the remnants of this whaling station down there. On the left are all of these barrels that would have been used to transport this whale oil to Europe and other parts of the world. There are giant tanks there that was used to boil this the fat to make the oil. There we've got a curious penguin checking out the propeller of one of the whaling ships that used to operate here. So this place is sort of acting as a museum, if you will, to this industry that once was. And just the wreckage of this place was really interesting to walk around. And I'm so grateful that places like this don't really exist like they did back then. And the whales themselves are making a rebound. In particular, one of my favorite whale species, the humpback whale. These are known for their breaching, jumping out of the water, splashing their tails. They can put on a real show in different parts all over the world. Humpback whales are found in pretty much every ocean all over. And they were facing extinction because of this whaling. Back in the 1500s, there were about 125,000 of these humpback whales. And in the 1960s, that number dropped to about 10% of what they used to be, down to only about 10,000 individual whales. But since the world imposed a ban on whaling, and we're using other technologies to lubricate our machines and our cars, and electricity now is widespread, obviously, so we've got electricity instead of having to have whale oil lamps, their population has rebounded, which is such a great success story. There are now about 80,000 humpback whales. They're not back to the numbers that they were previously, but they're doing great. They're actually on their way back. So that is one example of these a conservation success story. So it's not all doom and gloom out there. The efforts that we have made in some regards are making a lot of progress. It's a slow progress, but it is happening. So that makes me really happy to see these whales make a comeback. And so that's just a real quick example of some of the things that I saw on this recent voyage down to Antarctica. And I'm sure you guys have plenty of questions. I'm happy to answer any question about anything that you might have. So, Joe, I'm sure you've probably got some questions lined up there.
I do, George. We're going to have lots of questions. So if you're tuning in via the chat, don't be shy. Send in some of those questions. But George, I got an itching to play a Kahoot quiz. We haven't had one for a little bit. So I think we should play a little Kahoot quiz while we wait for some of the questions to come in via the chat.
Sounds good.
So I am going to load this up here. And then we are going to do a few questions while people join the Kahoot. And then after the Kahoot, we'll continue on with a few more of those questions.
All right,
so
let's see how smart everybody is.
All right. Let's see here. Who wants to join our Kahoot? I'm going to share my screen right now. It should come up. I want game mode. And... oh, interesting. They have updated to professional. Let's see what happens when I... Oh, no, that is not. Oh, good. It just looks new, but it's still pretty much the same as before. So that's good. If you would like to join, you need to go to kahoot.it. So kahoot.it. And then it's going to ask you for a PIN number. The PIN number is there, 456-4888. Or... you can use that QR code if you have maybe a device like a tablet, or if you're watching from home and you have something like a phone. If you're not able to join with tech, no big deal. You can still shout out the answers in your classroom to your teacher, and you can see how you do when it finishes. But we've got groups sailing in, emojis flying as they're coming in, which is great. So I think we're going to have a good little Kahoot session here. But we do have some groups backstage. So let's bring some of them in for a question while we wait for the things to settle down. We're already over 100 participants, which is great.
Wow. A lot of names coming in.
Mrs. Fisher's crew, how are we doing today? Good. All right. Who's got a question for George?
Remember? I have one question too. So, can any Penguins live in warm planets.
Can any penguins live in warm places?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely they can. There are penguins at the equator in places like Peru and parts of Chile. So we think of penguins as living just in Antarctica. And by the way, if you've ever seen like a cartoon that has penguins at the North Pole, that is incorrect. There are no penguins at the North Pole. There are no polar bears at the South Pole. So yes, you can get penguins in warm places in South America, in South Africa. They have penguins. So yes, absolutely you can. They're smaller penguins, different species, but yes, there are penguins there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, great question to start us off. I'm going to grab one from YouTube here, George. They're wondering if all the rocking, you said it made the food kind of go shaky, but did it rock you to sleep? Was the rocking helpful for that?
You know, if the rocking is just right, it can actually help sort of lull you to sleep. Yes, it takes a bit of time to get used to it. And I think now over the years, I've done enough ship trips to sort of get my sea legs a little bit better than I used to. So yeah, it's a little more soothing than it used to be. If you're not used to it though, it'll make you sick.
All right. One more here from the chat, and then I think we'll get started. We've got almost 300 Coot participants, which is great.
Nice.
This question is about whales. Did you learn while you were there how many young a whale can have at a time?
Oh wow! I would. That depends on the species. Now they're big mammals, so they give birth to live young. They don't lay eggs like many fish species do. They're mammals, and so whales typically will only have one calf at a time. There may be some species that may have two, but usually it's just one, and they have a very long gestation period. So when a whale is pregnant, they stay pregnant for a very long time.
All right. Well, George, let's get this Kahoot going. I'm going to hit start, and let's see how we do. Remember, the quicker you get the right answers in, the more points. So the magnetic North Pole is always found in the same location. This is a true or false question coming your way. The timer's counting. The answers are flying in. Over 50 answers in already. So true or false, the magnetic North Pole is always found in the same place, the same location.
Is it true? Is it false?
I don't know. We're going to find out. Over 200 answers and 2 seconds left. All right. We learned today that that is false. The magnetic North Pole, it moves around. It's not always found in the same location.
It's moving right now as we speak.
Okay, let's go to our next question. Oh, here we go. How wide can the wingspan of an albatross be? 1 meter, 2.5 meters, 3.5 meters, or as large as 5 meters? What do you think? Albatross are pretty big birds. Pretty awesome birds. Big wingspans.
The biggest.
As large as 5. As small as 1. Like George was about to say, biggest wingspan of any bird. Over 270 answers in and 2 seconds to go. All right, there we go. Good job, crew. 3.5 meters. 5 meters would be crazy. 15 feet.
That
would be really impressive to see if it was if a bird with a wingspan.
They're big. They're not that big.
Yeah. Okay, true or false? If we protect the sea ice, we protect the emperor penguins. What do you think? Here we go. If we protect the sea ice, we protect those emperor penguins. True or false? 12 seconds on the timer. The clicking of answers here, keeping us company. The counter shading of these penguins is pretty darn cool. Good job, crew. True is absolutely correct.
Absolutely.
We've got one more coming your way. What's the largest whale, animal on the planet? So 2 titles. Is it the humpback? Is it the blue? Is it the minke? Or is it the fin whale?
This should be an easy one.
I hope so. Let's get those answers in there. I know this whale has a heart about the size of a little Volkswagen Beetle. So that's pretty darn big. You could fit inside its aorta where it comes out of the heart. That's pretty crazy. Let's see. We've got 3 seconds left. All right. Good job, crew. Absolutely is our blue whale. I think we have a scoreboard to check out. It changes the podium. So let me see. Let's see what it looks like, the new podium. In third place, we've got the diplomat hyena. In second place, we've got the crafty narwhal.
Nice.
And in first place, here we go. 4 out of 4, the rockstar giraffe. There we go, rockstar giraffe. Congratulations to that class.
Good job.
And thanks to everybody for playing Kahoot with us. It's always a little bit of fun. Let's focus now, the rest of the time we have together, 100% on Q&A action. So if you are joining in, don't be shy to use that chat sidebar. Send your questions in. We've got a couple camera classes I'm going to bring in here as well. So let me start with Division 2. Division 2, how are we doing today?
I can hear them, but I can't see them.
I hear them, yeah. Division 2, how are we doing? You guys have a question over there for us?
Yeah.
All right, we're ready.
My question is, have you ever been like sucked into a tornado?
Sorry, have I ever
Have
you ever been?
sucked into a tornado?
Yeah.
So we didn't really talk about it on this particular session today, but I've been a storm chaser for over 25 years now, and that's sort of how I got my start. But no, I've never been sucked into a tornado, but I have been on the edge of a tornado with lots of flying debris flying around. I had to go hide behind a building that was in Oklahoma, which is, of course, one of the most tornado-dense places on Earth. Being sucked up into a tornado is not something that I would ever want to do, and I try to avoid that as much as I can.
All right. That's good advice, I think, for anybody, but
Good
especially a
advice.
storm chaser.
Don't get sucked up into a tornado.
Yeah, absolutely.
It seems kind of obvious.
Let's get Mrs. Fisher's crew back in here. I see someone waiting patiently.
How
for the camera.
cold can the South Pole get in winter?
Oh, crazy cold. Joe, can you Google that for me? If I'm not mistaken, I believe the coldest temperatures ever encountered at the South Pole are somewhere in the -70 range. And that's not including the wind chill.
Yeah.
What's the answer, Joe?
I know. Yeah. So we've got here minus, so it can hit minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So minus 70 degrees.
Yeah, I think it was in that range.
Yeah. And then you're right. Add the wind chill to that and whew.
Yeah, incredibly cold. But where I was along the coast during the Antarctic summer, which is our winter up here in North America, the temperatures that I was experiencing were actually warmer than at home in Canada. So we got temperatures maybe as cold as -10 Celsius, whereas at home it was -20 with tons of snow. So because it's in the southern hemisphere, summer is winter, winter is summer compared to the northern hemisphere.
All right.
Thanks, Joe.
Awesome. Thanks for the question. Let's go back to the chat here. We've got some questions in the chat. George, when you were on the ship, did any of the naturalists talk about roughly how many emperor penguins we have left? That's the next question here in the chat.
I don't know of the exact numbers.
Yeah.
There are quite a few colonies around Antarctica, and sometimes they can only really discover these colonies because of satellite imagery, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So it's hard to tell exactly how many there are. They live in such remote places. And because they spend most of their time out at sea, it's hard to get a really good number. So I personally don't know.
Yeah. I did a quick check just in case. It's roughly 600,000. And that might seem like a lot, but it's not because those numbers are falling.
Yes.
And if they're going out into the ocean looking for food, they're not finding the food that they're looking for. And things like that, those numbers will continue to fall really, really, really quickly. So I know that sounds like a lot, but it's not, especially when they're falling.
They're very, it's a high number, but it's an unstable number.
Yeah. Next question I have here in the chat. While you were exploring this part of the world, did you ever feel like there was any risk or maybe you were in danger?
Well, there's always risk when going to these very remote places. we were on a ship in a part of the world where rescue is very difficult if anything were to go wrong. So safety is always number one. There were a few other research icebreakers that were in the area where we were, and they would be the only ships that could possibly respond to any kind of problem that we had.
Yeah.
When I was out on the sea ice walking around, I was always wearing an inflatable life jacket, just in case if you fall through or a crack forms. That water is extremely cold. It's so cold, as a matter of fact, it's below zero. Seawater can get as low as about minus 1.8 degrees because salty water has a lower freezing point than fresh water. And so hypothermia can happen really, really fast. So the worst thing that could happen would be to fall into that water. So yes, there are some safety things going on, but we were on a very sophisticated ship, taking every single safety precaution because we know how dangerous it can be. There are some places where we were where the other closest human beings were the astronauts flying above us in the International Space Station.
Very cool. So we a couple more questions in the chat about your other career as a storm chaser. And I know the answer to this question, but Elena does not. She wants to know if you've ever been near a volcano, George.
Well, the very first shot in your opening montage is literally me standing inside a volcano in the South Pacific. So yes, absolutely. I've been near and literally inside numerous volcanoes all over the world. I will often do these big expeditions where I rappel sometimes 400 meters down inside an active volcano to get as close as possible to these giant boiling lakes of lava. I've done that in the South Pacific, in Vanuatu. I've done it in Ethiopia, in Congo, a few other places. So, oh yes, not only have I been near them, I've been in them.
All right. There we go, Elena. I hope that answers the question. Miss Fisher's class, I see someone waiting patiently at the camera, so we'll bring you in.
No, there.
Here we go.
What's the smallest type of whale?
Ooh, the smallest type of whale. That's a great question. I don't think I know the answer to that. It becomes a bit complicated because some things that we call whales are not whales. Like a killer whale, an orca, is actually a dolphin. And so I don't know, but I know the guy that can give me the answer. Joe, you're already on it, I'll bet you.
Well, just off the top of my head, the whales and dolphins are in the same family together. So if we consider them together, I would say it's the vaquita or I'm saying their name right. They are super small
and really rare.
About a dozen left in the world,
I believe is the name.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
But whale specifically, let's check it out. Smallest whale. It's one of the pygmy whales, I bet. There's a dwarf sperm whale. So that is the smallest whale in the world. It's about 2 meters.
Only 2 meters.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. See, I'm learning stuff today too.
All right. Thank you for that great question.
Thank you.
Let's see. I was going to do a different one, but then this one came in the bottom. I can't resist. George, did you go to school to become a storm chaser?
No, I did not. I went to school to be an engineer, and I did that for many, many years. And then I started chasing storms as a hobby, and I learned on my own how to forecast the weather, how to navigate safely around storms. And then I expanded my own learning and knowledge to other forces of nature, to wildfires, volcanoes, hurricanes, lightning, hail, these remote parts of the world, sandstorms in Antarctica, and all of these extremes. All of that has been done on my own, reading, studying, learning from others. I had a lot of great mentors over the years. And there's no storm chasing school. You can't go to school to learn how to do it because it doesn't exist.
All right. Michael wants to know, from your trips to the polar regions, what's been your favorite part?
Oh, God, that's such a hard question because I've done many trips. This was my 6th time to Antarctica. I've been to Greenland 5 times, and the Canadian Arctic and Iceland and all over so many times. What's my favorite part? Wow. Oh, you asked me the impossible questions. I love the remoteness. That's what I really love. There are parts where you can go and there's no one else around. True wilderness, real, raw wilderness. And I think that's my favorite part, going to these places where you can literally walk off the path and you're suddenly standing in a place where no human has ever stood before. I love that.
That's pretty good. What about, so more wildlife questions here. Polar bear, this time around, when you were in the Arctic, did you see a polar bear?
I've seen lots of polar bears up in the Arctic. The last time I was in the Arctic was last March, so just over a year ago. I'll be there again next year. And yes, we saw polar bears. The best place to see polar bears is actually in Canada, in northern Manitoba, in Churchill, and in and around Churchill, Manitoba, right on Hudson Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And there we were able to get really close to polar bears on land, maybe 15 meters away, so extremely close. I do not recommend it. I was with a bear expert who was teaching me all about polar bear body language, so we were able to read the bear's intent and stay safe. But generally speaking, when you're in those parts of the world, you are now not at the top of the food chain. Polar bears are one of the few animals that will hunt and eat humans. So they require a tremendous amount of respect and distance.
All right. Jacob, I'm itching to talk about this question because I love sharks. Jacob was curious if any sharks in Antarctic, did they talk about sharks at all on the trip?
Yes! Just recently, there was a shark that was spotted in Antarctic waters near the South Shetland Islands, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong there. But it was the first time that a shark species was ever seen that far south. So we're learning new things about the ocean all the time. We've only been able to explore a small part of it. And we always thought that the water was too cold to support populations of sharks. But now we've been proven wrong. Joe, you probably met some of the people involved in that, I would imagine. But yes, just recently, less than a year ago, we have discovered sharks down there. And it's so cool.
All right. Awesome. And just to add to that too, because there was a side question there about are sharks endangered, and it depends on the species. And you know this, George, we have between 400 to 500 species of sharks, and some of the big ones, their populations have fallen over 90% due to bycatch and shark finning. And yeah, our sharks, our keystone species in the ocean, are in big trouble. So yes, there are a lot of endangered and critically endangered shark species.
Sharks have been around on our planet for so long. Sharks have been around longer than the rings that go around the planet Saturn. They're older than trees. There were sharks before there were trees, and they need to be protected. We need to keep our sharks.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we have hit that time. It always goes so fast, George, when we're hanging out with classrooms. There's always so many questions. I want to start off with a huge shout out to all the classrooms who joined us today. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for playing Kahoot with us. That's always a ton of fun. George, couldn't be happier to spend a little time with you after your crazy months of journeying. Glad you're back in Canada for a bit. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences in the Antarctic and some of the marine life, some of the other animals that you met while you were down there. Yeah, pretty awesome.
Thanks so much, Joe. I appreciate it. And I'm sure I'll be back again soon with more adventures.
All right. And Elena's backstage with Edwin. I think she might want to come in and say a little something before we sign off for today.
Thank you, everyone, so much for joining. And thank you so much, George. That was so informative. Great to learn more.
Excellent. Well, classrooms, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of the week. I know for a lot of classrooms, tomorrow's a PD day, so you're getting a long weekend. So I hope you enjoy your long weekend if you have one. And if you don't have one, what can you do? All right, we're going to sign off for today. Thanks, everyone.